hearing format, we need to make sure that the public can still observe and watch these and attend. And so we stream these live to YouTube so that anyone from the public can watch if they would like. The last thing I need to do is read our hearing script. This basically just covers the procedure of the hearing today, and then we'll jump right into it. So this is the December 1st, 2021 session of the Zoning Hearing Examiner docket. My name is David Sturkey. I'm the Zoning Hearing Examiner for the City of Cincinnati, and I will preside over this hearing. The case before us today is case number ZH20210168. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer and refute evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and the supplemental rules of the Zoning Hearing Examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or any opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing, unless a party has submitted evidence or testimony in the form of writing prior to this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows. Today, we do have one neighbor that would like to make a motion that we will start with. After that, depending on how the outcome of that motion, the applicant, the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will present the applicant's case. The public will then have an opportunity to speak after the applicant has presented its case. In the event any party testifies or offers argument in opposition to an application, the applicant shall have an opportunity to rebut that testimony and or argument that's been offered in opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make any closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I will close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. So for our purposes here today, again, I think Mr. Levinson would like to make a formal motion on the record. Depending on how that goes, we will then hear from the applicant and any of the applicant's witnesses. So the professional team that's here, the Frondorfs, they will all have an opportunity to testify if they would like about this project, why it's appropriate, why I should grant it. I'll then give anyone here from the public, the neighbors, who would like to comment on this particular application an opportunity to do that. We'll go back to the applicant side, allow them to respond to any of those public comments, and then make any closing remarks. So for the neighbors and the public, you will just have one opportunity to provide any input on this hearing, on this case today. So just keep that in mind. I may limit or exclude any testimony that I deem irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker to ask questions or to make any comments. I may also refuse to consider hearsay testimony or documents. This generally means evidence you want to introduce that consists of statements made by someone who's not present at the hearing today. In the event of any technical difficulties or any unforeseen circumstances with the video conferencing technology, I may continue or postpone this hearing at my discretion. We'll do our best to troubleshoot those on the fly. We already have someone who's having trouble signing in. We'll do our best to work with those, but to the extent there's some defect that we cannot fix, I may continue or postpone the hearing. Okay, I believe that is it. The last thing I need to do here is just swear in all of our witnesses. So let's go ahead and do that. If you intend on providing any testimony here today, making any comments, asking any questions, doing anything other than just strictly observing the hearing, then you need to be sworn in. So if that is you, if you could take yourself off mute, I need everyone to raise their right hand, and I need everyone to answer out loud. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
I do.
Yes, I do.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we're going to start. Mr. Levinson, I'm going to turn it over to you. You made a request in writing yesterday for our continuance. Would you like to, would you still like to ask for a continuance on this hearing?
I would, yeah.
Do you want to provide any explanation or any reasoning or any argument behind that?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the call here, I mean, there's a pretty big army of people on the applicant side. Greg and I, and as neighbors, people who are impacted by this, have had very little time to actually assess the application, the impacts, and to be able to ultimately be able to provide our own witnesses that would be able to discuss impacts to values of our homes, better show visually what the project would actually look like. It's impossible for us to have been able to do anything between the 48 or 72 hours since we've known about this notice until now to be able to provide any sort of evidence in our favor.
Mr. Niemeyer, he mentioned you. Are you also in support of a continuance of this hearing today?
I mean, it would be helpful if we had more time to gather data, same purposes. Is there anything more quantifiable we can put together that says this project will impact the real estate value, and or just to really visualize what this would look like. I have no concept. So I mentioned it to Dan when we talked, and I assume the data points are out there and someone has the capability to do this, but I don't know. But if someone could, from the angle of the project, put together like what it would look like from Jay's house. So where does the thing come? Where does it, how occluded is his view? Obviously, this is hillside property. The view is one of the critical dimensions of the value of the property. And I can't really visualize it. I understand where what the height is intended to be above sea level compared to my property, compared to Jay's. But the city sits down in a bowl from where we are. So, and we're looking off in a distance. So what's the impact? What do we see? What don't we see? I don't know. So if there is someone who has software that could render that, it would be really useful, but we haven't had time to put anything together. So it's hard to really, make a value statement.
Okay.
I don't know if that
Thank you,
makes sense
Mr.
or not. Sure.
It made sense to me. Thank you. Okay. So I'll turn it over to either the Frondorfs or whoever would like to respond to this, but essentially, I think it's clear what they're asking for here today. They would like some more time to look over this application. From a logistical standpoint, if I were to grant this continuance, we could continue this case out for 2 weeks. I think that's the quickest we could bring it back here. But we could also do it for longer. But I'd like to hear a response from the Frondorfs and anyone else that would like to respond.
Thank you, David. I'd like to go first. I'm not sure if any of my team members will weigh in on this, but while we understand Jay and Greg's point of view, we respectfully disagree with the request for the continuance. The amount of time they've had to review the application is not 48 hours. It's been at least 2 weeks since everybody got a notification in the mail about today's hearing. The application file has been available for upload or download from the city's website, as far as I know. So we think there's been plenty of time to do that. With respect to some sort of document or rendering or something, the creation of something that would help with the visualization, to me, that's a pretty big ask. I think there's sufficient information in the record already. I did upload a couple of additional documents, 3 additional documents this afternoon or this morning, once we had a chance to review the staff report. And I think that the uploads that we've provided, if we get to them in this hearing, should be sufficient enough to allow our neighbors to visualize how their view would be impacted. So that's our point of view. We've waited a long time for this, and any additional delay is just going to set the whole process back. So we respectfully disagree with the need to continue the hearing. Thank you.
Okay. So on motions like this, it's difficult because we have a sort of set guidelines for when that are established in the Cincinnati Municipal Code. It's the law that we have to follow of when these notices go out. I know that sometimes that the window can feel a bit tight for folks, but that is sort of standard across the board how these notices are sent out and when we're supposed to do them. And so in cases like this, I do tend to give a little bit more credence to, not credence, it's not the right word, but I tend to lean in favor of the applicant who's coming in front of us and what their preferences are. And so I'm going to deny the continuance here today. We will move forward. Mr. Niemeyer, is there knowing my decision, is there something you'd like to say?
Yeah. My only other input would be I don't live at that property anymore. The mail was sent to 918 Mount Hope, and I just got the thing 3 days ago or 2 days ago because my tenant who lives there sent my wife a picture of it. and said, hey, look at this. So I don't know. I found out more recently than the 2 weeks would allow. Obviously, he sent it out to the known address, but I haven't lived there in 12 years. Anyway, or 10 years. So there we go. But understand you got to do what you got to do. He followed the process. So I don't think he can could he actually tangibly show that a delay would set the project back? Do you have a PERT chart or a Gantt chart that shows when you've got people scheduled? I mean, are you just saying it's delayed because you don't want to? I mean, I haven't seen, you got to quantify that too, but understand your decision, do what you got to do. But him saying that it delays it, there's no proof of that.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks is like, it's not a big deal, but okay.
But to be clear, if someone puts something in front of you that could burn $100,000 out of your net equity, and you get 2 weeks to look at it, that's pretty unneighborly. There we go. But anyway, a process is the process, and I understand you guys have to have, you have to follow it, and you got to be timely. So do what you got to do.
Thanks, Mr. Niemeyer. Appreciate your input. And there certainly is a balance that needs to be struck between people's desire to move forward on projects and projects to move forward in a timely manner, and also giving proper notice to neighbors in the surrounding area. Again, like I said, it is sort of locked in the code. The people that write the code and make the decisions about what's in the code are not me, and it's not the building or building department either. And so, we've had folks reach out to elected officials and council with these concerns, because I feel like that's the best forum and where any real change is going to come from. Mr. Frondorf, we're going to go ahead and get started. The motion is denied. So if you'd like to speak towards that,
No.
I'm going to not allow.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, we need to move on. So let's go ahead. Who's going to take the lead here for the applicant in their case?
I will.
Okay.
And then I'd like to supplement my comments with input from my design team if I can. Is that appropriate?
Sure,
Okay.
That's fine. I'm going to ask, I may set some time parameters here on testimony. Okay. I think, 25 minutes on the maximum side is what's going to be appropriate for today. So,
okay. I'm going to endeavor to be brief. I don't want to rehash our entire application letter. It's on the record and everybody can read it. I'd like to primarily address my comments to our review of the staff report this morning. And just, not that it matters, but I see Walter on the call, but he wasn't properly introduced. So I'd like it on the record that he's here. Hi, Walter. It's good to meet you finally.
The record will reflect that the zoning plans examiner, Walter Mueller, is present and will testify.
Thank you. And I want to just make a few comments about the staff report. And then the variances, and I'll address the height as well. The staff report makes a couple of comments that I respectfully disagree with. I'm not sure what page number this is, but the staff report makes a comment that the proposed building may negatively impact views in the vicinity. The building height is 39.8 to the 0.8 to the midpoint of the gable. The actual height is approximately 42 feet from grade. This makes the rooftop ASL above sea level elevation approximately 812 compared to the base elevation of the homes on Mount Hope of approximately 812. I'd like to put some real numbers instead of approximate numbers to that. And can I reference a document that I uploaded? David, what's the protocol for that? Do I share the screen or
if you'd like, you can share the screen. That's typically best. That way your cursor is responsive to your direction.
Okay, let me get what I'm talking about in front of me. So thank you for your patience here. Not sure can you see this profile view?
We can see a drawing.
Okay, good. All right. This is something that we put together this morning in response to the staff report. we contend that our actual roof peak elevation is 809.83. And there's 132 feet of distance between the west building wall of our house. And in this instance, we use Jay's house, 920, 132 feet between his east wall and our west wall. And there is 3.17 feet of elevation difference. So the we feel like these, I don't want to talk about approximates. If we can use actuals. This is a pretty good calculation, I think, and I'd like to have Scott Huber address how we came up with this, if we could, and Tony as well, because I think it makes a point that our roof is actually lower than not only Jay's living room level elevation and deck, but Greg's as well. Greg's is actually a little bit higher than Jay's. So is it okay for Scott to chime in?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
Okay, Scott?
Sure, thank you. Yes, just for the record, for the horizontal distance of 132 feet, that's from a topographic and location survey that we performed to meet the hillside requirements. There's requirements for us to measure the building heights and the locations of the adjoining property owners. So we know where the buildings are, for where the corner of the buildings are for, like 920, 924, 926 Mount Hope Avenue. So that's where the 132 feet horizontal distance came from. From the elevation, we used GIS information and the CAGIS topographic information from that. And that in combination with the, Google Street View and Google Earth. So we determined that the elevation at the front of 920 Mount Hope Avenue is roughly 813 in elevation. And from the architectural plan that was submitted, we know that the height of the building is 38 feet 10 inches to the midpoint of the roof there, and then there's another 4 feet to get to the top of the roof. So if you add those numbers together from the finished floor elevation that's established on the plan, that's where the 809.83 elevation comes from. So as you can see, just by using those numbers, the deck elevation is above the peak elevation of Mr. Frondorf's roof. And also I would point out that, that 813 is the actual deck. So, if you're sitting on a chair, somebody's looking out over the deck onto the city, typically that eye height is about another 4 feet. So a person's eye, when they're sitting in a chair on the deck, is really at 817. And, the very top of our roof is at 809.83. So there's some, there's going to be the ability for the resident of 920 Mount Hope Avenue to be able to still see the city and see over top of the highest point of the roof of the Frondorf residence.
Thanks, Scott. David, on the screen right now is a picture we found, I believe it was from a Zillow website, of when this house was for sale at 920. And this gives a good view of, a good look at the view from Jay's street level deck, which is not his lower deck. You can see he's got a lower deck, and Greg does as well. But these are the main level decks I would submit. And and with all due respect to Greg and Jay's point, it's hard to envision where our roof line is going to be. Jay and I tried to do an exercise yesterday where we tried to envision what that would be. And it's hard to represent over Zoom, but our roof line probably won't even be at the level of the top of the railing. So that's about where the top of our roof is going to be. And I'm not saying it's 100% perfect, but it's not going to be, if you can follow my cursor, it's not going to be up here where we're totally eliminating the view. There's still going to be a substantial view. And I might point out that this image obviously was taken in the fall because of the pumpkins, but the trees are still leafed. And so the vegetation impacts the view as much as anything else. And in fact, in the last several years, almost every single property owner on Mount Hope has approached us about cutting trees down to help improve their view. And I've always rejected that request because I like the trees. I like the buffer. I like the quiet. I like the noise. I like the oxygen. So I guess where I'm going with this is I do feel like we will change their view. They're going to see a house where right now they see maybe part of our garage, but mostly vegetation for 8 months out of the year. But we're not going to rob them or eliminate the view that they enjoy here. It might be tough to tell, but this is Jay's deck. Here's Greg's. Greg's is somewhere between, I'm going to say, 3 and 4 feet higher than Jay's. So that if we did the same math here, you know, we could add another 3 or 4 feet to this. And to Scott's point about the, you know, the chair level or the eye level, you know, that's another, you know, 3 to 4 feet. So our point is that we're still going to have a substantial, meaningful view of the valley below and everything that we see in the distance. I want to make another point about what was in the staff report. The staff report in the same paragraph goes on to say, there is no identifiable justification for the height relief requested. It's simply requesting additional height to construct a taller building, which is not in the spirit and intent of the hillside overlay standards. A couple of comments about that. Even if we lowered this height to 35 feet above the gable, or to the midpoint of the gable, my neighbors are still going to have their view impacted much in the same way as it is with the additional, you know, 4+ feet of height. Their view is going to change because they're going to see a house where right now, the house that's there now, the one I'm sitting in right now, that's going to be gone. So we really aren't going to be taking away their view. We're going to change it, admittedly, sure, but it's not going to eliminate it. And earlier, Greg referenced, you know, some, I think it was $100,000 number. It's difficult for all of us. None of us are appraisers to put a dollar value on what the view adds to the property. I know it's substantial. That's why we're all here in this neighborhood. But at the same time, any valuation that anybody utters, including me, is just a guess, you know, and even a licensed appraiser is just making his best guess. So I think that whatever dollar value is offset by the change in the view, not the elimination of it, it's going to be more than offset by the increase in property value to have a very nice house, you know, in the neighborhood just below. And with respect to the staff comment that there's no identifiable justification, I would refer you to our application letter where I spend a page and a half making nothing but justifications for it. And I just want to utter a few of those if I could. You know, the first thing is we have to have a circumstance that is not of our creation to ask for the variance. And that the fact that our property is in the hillside district is that circumstance. You know, we have the same ability and right to enjoy our view as much as anybody else that lives in the neighborhood. We're not taking it from anybody. We're just really asking for the same thing. And that is to have the chance to enjoy the same view. We have property below us, houses and vegetation that partially obscures the view. And I'm okay with that. That's fine. But we would like to be a little bit higher just to improve our view to some extent. Also, there's a financial benefit to us to have this higher roof because we are chasing LEED, and LEED will allow us to receive a property tax abatement. That is a substantial amount of money. If we get LEED Gold, it's over $500,000 for 15 years. And our bank is the one that is really requesting that we go through the LEED. So in order to get the LEED, the solar component, we're going to have some solar panels on the roof. That's part of us getting LEED Gold. And in order to have that best solar exposure, we're trying to elevate the pitch of the roof a little higher to get the best solar exposure. If we had a flatter roof, the solar panels would only be gathering sun from, really the midpoint of the day to the afternoon. But we would like to, capture that morning sun, especially in the summertime. That's why we're not putting panels on the west side of the house. We're putting them on the east because that's where the best sun exposure is. We've got vegetation behind us and other houses that'll impact the solar exposure on that side. So we do have an incentive for that. There is another comment in the staff report about the stepping of the hill with which we respectfully disagree. And let me get to the right page. Thank you for being patient with me as I find it. It's only 7 pages. It ought to jump out at me here. Okay. The staff report says, quote, the development guideline 19 talks about staggering the units according to the topography. In the following depiction, you can see that the proposed new home will stand out and look as if the hillside steps up significantly where the new home is proposed. This is not the intent of the guidelines. The homes are to look as if they are an extension of the topography of the hillside. The additional height makes this building over 4 feet taller than is permitted and is not allowing the streetscape appearance to step up according to the topography in the guideline. And it goes on to say the 35-foot home would be allowed by right, inserted here for reference. So I don't know if you guys can see the image. It's going to be hard to figure out what the image really means, but the whole point of the stepping consideration is that as the street and the property rises, so should the roof lines and so should the house. And ours does. And a 35-foot house, as opposed to a 39-foot 10 or 38-foot 10 inch to the midpoint of the gable, I respectfully suggest that's indiscernible from the street. And I don't think it disrespects the stepping guideline at all. If we had a lower roof line than the proper one that was at the same elevation as the one to our east, 2633 Maryland, then we would be violating it because we wouldn't be stepping up, but we are indeed stepping up. So I want to make the comment that, I do think we respect the stepping guideline. And I want to ask the question, does design guideline number 19, does it indicate a maximum or a minimum or a recommended step, either by elevation height or by percentage of slope? If not, it's purely subjective, but our house does step up, and we respectfully disagree with that part of the staff report as well.
Okay.
How am I doing on time?
You're doing fine.
Okay.
Another 5 minutes.
Okay. I'd like to ask another question. Did city staff, the zoning planning examiner, other staff, or the hearing examiner visit the site to take a look for themselves about the impact on the community?
So I'll let Walt answer that for himself during his testimony, but I have not visited it to date.
Okay.
But I am required to do site visits, which
Okay.
usually entail some version of a drive-by or walking through the neighborhood before I make my final decision.
Okay. I asked my neighbors if they would be willing to open their houses to somebody from the city to get a look for themselves from your decks. And if so, if such a site visit is granted, we'd like to be present at the same time. And I hope you find that's a reasonable request. And it's something that I would really, David, I would like you to make that request of them if you do come out. So I guess I'm really asking you. But I'll toss it out there to the fellows as well, because I think for you to understand their point of view, as well as ours, it would be beneficial for you to see it for yourself. I
typically will not make any what's called ex parte communications about the substance of hearings during the pendency of those hearings. So that essentially just means I won't talk to one side unless everyone is present.
Okay. That goes to my request to be present if you do. But I do think it would be fair to Jay and Greg for you to see that, because then, you know, I know even 2 weeks isn't enough time, as Jay and Greg pointed out, but you have to consider their point of view. They've got the same substantial investment in this neighborhood that we do, and we've tried really hard to be good property owners. You know, our application here is definitely in the public interest. I know we're a little taller than what the code allows for. And even though, yes, it's easy on new construction to build to a certain dimension, as the staff report points out in their recommendation of denial of the height variance. However, if that's why we have the variance process for you to consider, you know, certain circumstances that are particular to one particular application. So our proposal here is a big investment in not just the neighborhood, but the city. We will raise property values. There's no doubt about it. We're keeping our money in our home and our jobs here in the city. You know, we want to stay here. The reason that we haven't taken our opportunity to find a forever home, so to speak. We've been here for 25 years. It seems like forever, but you know, there's a lot of reasons we want to stay, but it's mostly because of the people. But it's the neighborhood, the characteristics here, and I think we're really respecting that. And I do respectfully object to the word unneighborly that somebody threw out earlier with respect to how much time we have. I think that was an unfair characterization of us, and that's not what we're doing. We're not developing this to rent out. We're owner occupants, and we've got good history here. And I think what we're trying to do is ultimately and overall very reasonable, and it's good for the city and good for the neighborhood. So I thank you for your consideration. I really don't have any other comments. I did want to have Tony address the building height, but Tony, if that's okay with you, I think Scott did a pretty good job of that. So unless David wants to hear from you, I think that's okay. Okay. All right, I yield, David. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Frondorf. I have a couple questions, but I think I might allow our neighbors that want to testify and Walter Mueller testify first, and then I may ask you some questions after that. So I'm just going to go in the order of how I see it on my screen. And again, I appreciate the hand raising, guys, but unless there's something particularly urgent, you will have an opportunity to testify, and that opportunity is right now. So, Mr. Levinson, what would you like to tell us?
So, you know, I know there's been a lot of talk about kind of, I guess, superfluous information about are we good neighbors and not. Without a doubt, Dan and his wife are fantastic neighbors. This has nothing to do with that. This just has to do with the height of the house that they want to build. I would love for them to build this house. I think it's going to be great. I don't want to impede them doing that, but I do want to impede them building the height of the house that they want to build. It is not a big deal to reduce it by 5 feet. It is going to drastically create a better impact to me and to the financial impact that this will have to my home. To say that it is impossible to create a quantifiable number is just outright false. You can very clearly talk to realtors and appraisers, and they will tell you, if you look at a 3-bedroom, 3-bath house that's 2,000 square feet, that is on Mount Hope and has city views, direct city views, and if you look at that same house with the same square footage on Mount Hope without city views, it's about $100,000 different. My home has clear city views from all 4 finished levels, including the finished basement. I just spent $16,000 redoing my bottom deck with the impact of actually being able to see the city from my bottom deck. He said in his report that there would be no impact at all to views or financial, and yet nobody that we've seen, nothing that I've seen here, has any evidence of that, because very clearly it will have a negative impact on both my and Greg's value of our homes. What that value is remains to be seen. But to say that it wouldn't have an impact is outright false. He's even said it is going to have a negative impact on our views. That is correct. It is going to do that, even though in the application he said that it would not have an impact on those. When later today he said it would. He also said that the look from the street and like talking about the house. If you look at the street, and I know you said you would do a drive-by, but even if you don't, even if you just do like a Google Street View, all of the houses in our entire area here look awesome. The reason why Dan loves this street and loves this area, these are historic homes. My house was built in 1910. I think Greg's was built in like 1908 or 1905. No, 19. Anyway, it doesn't matter. They're very old homes. They all look very similar. And on his street on Maryland, they're all row homes. They are 2 stories tall. A couple of them have a rooftop deck on top of them. They're all in a line in terms of the depth of them. His is going to be drastically further in front. It's going to be about twice as wide and almost twice as tall. It is not matching the view of the neighborhood and other houses on the street. In terms of visually, it looks drastically different from the front. It's much larger. It's much taller. All of those things are true, and I encourage you to look at the street and to look at the other homes because it is drastically different. Again, that shouldn't really matter into it. Really, it's very clear. There are legal requirements on height. He's asking for it to be higher. It is too tall. Walter, myself, and Greg are objecting to the height, not to the project, just to the height. And I feel that also the last thing that I wanted to talk about is he talked about that the one of the reasons why it had to be taller was so that he could obtain LEED Gold status. That's actually not true. That's unequivocally false. You just LEED Gold status is based off of points. It's a point system. And so you can actually get points in other areas. You don't have to have the roof. You can get it in other areas. I can't think of things, but he has like a rainwater receptacle tank that's underground. You could put solar panels on other pieces of the house. It doesn't have to be on the roof. He could very easily have a flat pitched roof and still have solar and still actually be able to get those credits. And actually, when we were speaking with, I actually spoke with a friend who sells solar. He said, actually, it's much easier and better for people to have a flat pitched roof if you have solar, because otherwise he only gets sun in the morning. If it's a flat pitched roof, they actually have actuators that track where the sun is, and you can get more sun. So he'd be able to not only still qualify for the credit, still get the tax rebates, but also be able to not negatively impact our home values and also be able to get more electricity, which is ultimately the goal, is to be able to save him money on his energy bills by leveraging those types of things. So that's pretty much all that I had. Yeah, I mean, there's been no evidence to say that there won't be a negative financial impact whatsoever. I think that anybody with just common sense would say, of course, it's going to have a negative impact on it. I mean, it's pretty cut and dry. If you look at historical sales on Zillow in the area here, there's a pretty big mountain of evidence that would be the case.
Okay.
I yield to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Levinson. Move on to Mr. Niemeyer. Mr. Niemeyer, what would you like to tell us?
I'd like to find my unmute button. So again, I don't have to add too much. There are literally thousands of house designs that would meet the requirement and fall within the requirement. You're not locked into this design. You chose a design that forced you to this variance conflict. There are, I mean, almost unlimited choices that would have fallen within the spec. 35 feet is wonderfully high. But so anyway, I'll leave it up to the way the law is written and the code is written to defend it. It's there for a reason. And you can have a beautiful, happy house that's 5 feet shorter. There are tons of designs. And I do find it ironic that we had asked for relief from the trees for decades to improve the view, and now that you want a view, you're going the legal route to force something higher than the law allows. So that's yeah, frustrating and ironic. So
thank you, Mr. Niemeyer. And Mr. Levinson, just one question from you quickly.
Yes.
So is your contention that that your views of the city and sort of the central basin will be obstructed by the
100%. It's not even up for debate, 100%.
And that's from every vantage point, including that top deck.
That is from the top deck will be impacted. The lower deck will be completely blocked. And then I have no public access. I mean, the point of having it is so that people, and the reason why Dan and them are having patios on is you have people over, you sit outside, you have dinner, and you overlook the city. That's why Prima Vista and Incline Public House are the most busy restaurants in the city, is because of the views that they have. We have the same views. We're lucky to have those views. To take that away, again, I own the house. I live in the house. I plan to be here, like Dan said, for a very long time. I've been a good steward of the neighborhood. And this definitely will impact. And he has yet to show anything that would show anything. And in fact, when he was at my house yesterday and we were discussing it, I think even he realized that it is going to impact my view significantly more than he had actually thought. Which I think he's never really been up there. I think he said it's been a long time since he had been up on that deck. And I think even he was starting to realize, hey, this is actually probably a little bit more than what he had thought. And I think it's also important to understand that we are higher than the city. So the way that Vantage works is that I have to look down slightly to be able to view the city. We're at a higher elevation than the city is. And so I have to actually look a little bit down. So if his house is, even if it's less, if they have to look at a vantage point that goes downward to see the city, ultimately it will still, even if it's at a lower elevation, it will still impact my view in a negative manner. And I think that that's also something that was not taken into account. And he was very specific about it. Let's not talk about hypotheticals. Let's talk about actualities and definitive numbers. I have yet to see anything. He shows me a paper with some guesses. It's absolutely not specific information on the height. It is just, like he said, here, look at Google Earth and Google Maps, and here's what the Cages says is the height. That's not saying we took a survey, we measured it out, we measured the distance from the top. They did not do that. It's just a guess, ultimately. And again, I don't want to stake potentially, and again, if it's $100,000, we can't say it's going to be all of that amount, but I would venture a guess it's between $30,000 and $50,000 that I will lose in the home value based off of this project and the impact that that's going to have permanently on my views. And ultimately on what I feel is the largest investment for almost any individual, which is their primary residence.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Levinson. All right, I'm going to move over to the zoning plans examiner, Walt Mueller. Walt, welcome.
How you doing, David?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous.
Great.
Would like to say that I appreciate the documents that were uploaded earlier. I wish I had opportunity to have that when I was doing my staff report. We have asked several times, or not me, but the two people that are in contesting this is some kind of a demonstration of what it would do to affect their view as they're looking down the grade into the bowl of the city. While we were talking, I actually created a couple drawings that will kind of demonstrate that. Would like your permission to present that. And like I said, these are approximates, and I am using the documents that they uploaded. Would that be
sure.
appropriate? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, I believe this is it. Can you see the two drawings there? One on the top, one at the bottom with the red line?
I can. Yep.
Okay. The top one here is one that I actually knocked about 4 foot off of it, which is the variance that he's asking for, showing the same sight line, this orange or red line that runs down through there. That's following the topography of the hillside as you go down the street into the city. And as you see, the bottom one is the actual height that they're saying it is with that same line drawing down through there. So there could be, and as I worded it, like I said, I didn't have this information. It looks as if there could be a significant view shed issue for them. And based on these drawings right here, kind of gives you an idea of what they would look like. They would have an opportunity, I believe, if we did go and if they would request a continuance at this point to actually generate documents that would show this more accurately. But like I said, this is just a general idea of what it would look like, just based on a quick assessment of how we draw this. Most of our hillsides, if you know, when we do this type of a comparison, is based on what you're looking at as you travel down the topography into the city. And so this is a good guess on what that would look like. So that's just something to look at. And then there's another, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a different section here. This right here was what he was talking about that he couldn't show real well. And if you notice, the homes on that street actually do go up a grade. And these are pretty representative of how those houses are placed on that hillside, on the street view. He is actually sitting in a bowl area that's kind of flat right there, which is the reason why we demonstrated it this way. Had he just moved over, it would be essentially the same height as this one would be appropriate to what the hillside is saying that should look like, because it is a flat area there that he is. And then it does substantially go up here to those homes up here, but it is a flat area where his home is right now. And this kind of demonstrates what it would look like between the two houses. This would be the one I have my cursor on right now is actually a compliant house. It would not have needed variance for height. And this is the house he's proposing. So as you can see, it's substantially larger looking in that area as opposed to what's already there. This is a hillside review. I know we've used the word several times, variances. So hillside review is exactly what it is. It's a review of whether or not this area is compliant with the guidelines of the hillside development, which is one of the requirements when we look at this, which is G. There are specific rules and regulations. We've talked about this several times before. The one area that is called out for and defined specifically in the hillside area is the maximum building envelope. Out of all the things in the recommendation, the one that they felt that is most compelling and needs to be followed is the maximum building envelope. And this home is being built outside of that envelope. And if there's any other questions, I'll be able to answer those for you.
Okay. Thank you, Walt. Thanks for your testimony. Okay, going to move back to the applicant side here and give you an opportunity to respond to any of the comments from the public or from Walt. I think Walt sort of took the question right out of my head, because I'm not super comfortable with geometry or math. That's probably why I became an attorney. But I have seen a lot of sort of line of sight studies that can be done with surprising accuracy. And I don't know if maybe some of the technical folks on the call could speak more to that, but I know that it's possible to do that. That may allay some fears or I don't know, make things a little bit more clear. So I guess my first question, Mr. Frondorf, and then feel free to respond to anything else was said, is why isn't there one of those, and would it be possible to produce them, and if so, would you be willing to do that?
I hope I'm off mute.
You are.
Sam, well, let me that's a multi-part answer, David. Why isn't there one? I did not direct the people on this call, my team, to do that. We didn't think we needed something at that level. I think the math, notwithstanding Walt's red lines on the document that we uploaded this morning, I didn't fully understand where he was going with that, but I get the point that the line of sight does intersect with the roof. So I get that. But I think what you're talking about, the type of thing you're talking about, is very expensive to produce. I'm sure that maybe Tony or Ken or Scott could address that type of thing. But we're talking about one house impacting two other houses, and not one house impacting the whole neighborhood or the whole community, that type of thing. So I think it's an unreasonable expense to ask us to go to do that. or to delay the process for that purpose. I think there's enough information here. I can't argue with what my neighbors' points of views are, other than to say that I never said there would be no impact on their view. I said, of course, their view is going to be impacted, especially from their lower decks. But it's not going to be any different than what it is now. And I would like for you to consider that. So I guess even if we built the 35-foot tall house to the midpoint of the gable, we're still going to go higher than that with our peak. And it's still, no matter what we build, it's going to be different than what they see now. So I don't want to get all that expensive creating some other type of rendering if they're just going to object to it again, because even if we had a code compliant house, we'd still have a public hearing. And I would imagine we might have some opposition because the view is going to be impacted even with a code compliant house. So that's, I guess those are my comments about what was said. Any assertion about a dollar amount is purely speculation. Even an appraisal would be purely speculation. So I don't discount the approximates that the guy stated, $30,000 to $50,000 or $100,000. I don't know, but nobody else in this call knows either for sure. So I guess at the end of the day, the bottom line is, again, we're just going to go back to what we're asking for. I think is reasonable. I understand everybody's points of view. I do want to make one other comment with respect to Walt's interpretation of our sketch. And if I could share the screen for a second.
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to, this is our civil design that Scott's firm prepared. And let's see, this is Paul, this is Emily, this is Joe and Ellie, this is Jay, and this is Greg. So you'll notice that Greg's house, let's assume his house is centered within his lot. We all have skinny lots up here in Price Hill. And Jay's right, this is an old neighborhood with a lot of historic character. But Greg's only going to be looking at sort of the back from his property, just the rear portion. This is Jay's line of sight. Jay's line of sight is going to be right in alignment with our new house. But Greg's is not completely aligned with our house. He's still going to be able to if you just took a straight line and considered that, you know, he's only going to be impacted from here over, just a portion of our house. I don't think it's unreasonable at all. So I do want you to consider that. I do want you to consider the distance, the 132-foot distance between our house and the back of Jay's house. That's quite a bit of perspective. You're right. You are looking down. Your eyeballs want to go down to the city. The city's approximately 350 feet lower than us. The river elevation's 455. We're at 760 to 820 thereabouts in this neighborhood. So there is quite a bit. So you do look down, but the city's a couple of miles away. So you've got that additional horizontal perspective that at the end of the day, the view it is a little different, but it's not eliminated and it's not completely gone. So I do hope you'll take that into consideration.
So Daniel, real quick, you did say that the top of the roof will be the same height as Mr. Levinson's top deck?
No, I did not say that.
So I thought you said it would be around the same height as the top deck or the floor of the top deck.
Let me get this back up here.
Sure.
Okay. Our roof peak's gonna be 809.83, and Jay's deck is at about 813.
Gotcha.
So and I know you can draw a line anywhere you want through here, and I appreciate Walt trying to do that. But the bottom line is, if your eyeballs were on the deck level, they'd still be higher than our roof. You're still going to be able to see over it. But by the time you're sitting, 2.5, 3 feet taller, or you're standing 4 to 6 feet taller, that's how the view is going to be enjoyed, and you're still going to be able to see over our roof. And I can take you back to that picture from Zillow. There's still going to be a substantial view there for my neighbors.
Yeah, I mean, again, Mr. Frondorf, though, I mean, I am admittedly not a geometry expert, but if the object that you're looking at is significantly below this, both of your houses and sort of the direction you're looking, it seems to me that there would be, like you said, at least some impact.
Of course, it's going to be different, David. Absolutely. I fully concede to that. It's going to be different, but it's not going to completely eliminate the view. And I don't think it's going to eliminate and this is my opinion, of course, it's different than Jay's, but I don't think it's going to rob them of very much value of their property. It's just going to be different.
Gotcha. And Mr. Frondorf, you talked a little bit about some of the reasoning, and I know you mentioned that you had several reasons that are outlined in your justification letter for the extra height, including lead. But outside of the things you've mentioned, I mean, what are you losing if this roof comes down to 35?
It's a fair question, David, and I'm prepared to answer that. If it comes down to that, then I engage my friend Tony to draw me a smaller house with shorter floors. In fact, this is the recommendation that Walt made to me in one of our earliest communications. But that's not the house that we want. The house that we want takes advantage of the view to a better degree than what we would have without it. So we have a right to enjoy the view just as much as our neighbors above us do. So we wouldn't have the same view. I can't tell you what level of enjoyment or monetary value it would take from us, and notwithstanding Greg's comments about solar, or maybe it was Jay that talked about the solar, we still want to have that on our roof. And so we can still maybe have solar, but I didn't want to put solar on both sides of the roof because I didn't want those guys to have to look at the west slope of our roof with anything on it other than a roof. But I guess the best way I can say this is, even if we built a code compliant house, I've made this point a few minutes ago, I'll do it again because I think it's important. I do think that there's a good chance for objection from the neighbors because, the house sits back further from the street than what they would like. I know Jay and I talked about that yesterday. And there are engineering reasons and math reasons that it's sited where it is and why it's at 767. I originally wanted it at 766, but that creates drainage issues for us, for the neighbor to our east. And I don't want to flood him with water. So if I can get it a little higher and pitch that water into that swale and into the rainwater tank, that helps solve a potential problem down there. So if I moved it closer to the street, it would take it almost completely out of Greg's line of sight, but it would still be in Jay's. But we'd have a steeper driveway. I'd have a very small front yard. We bought this lot because of the size of it, and I actually bought it. I didn't go into the circumstance of buying it with the intention of buying it, but that was the end result. But it's something that we've talked about for years of building a house here. So David, I don't know if I have a really good answer for your question, and I'm taking too long to try, but we could have a different house, a smaller house. But I don't know that we'd still be here for a public hearing. I'd have to go through this exercise all over again. And I'm not sure that I wouldn't get the same objections that I'm getting now. So I guess maybe that's the best answer I have.
Well, if it was built to 35 feet, the only relief that would need to be sought is the setback. And they wouldn't have an ability, the neighbors wouldn't have an ability to contest it at all or have any say. Well, so let me just say this. I think we've talked a lot in this hearing about sort of maybes and estimations and sort of back of the envelope drawings, which, I don't like making decisions based on that. So Mr. Frondorf, I would like to give you another opportunity to continue this case in progress, so that we can get some more definitive calculations on what the impact may actually be, and also allow you to continue to dialogue with the neighbors to see if there is any solution that is mutually agreeable. Now, of course, you're in the driver's seat here. If you don't want to take that opportunity to do a continuance, you can submit on the evidence that we've had here today, and I'll make a decision. But I wanted to give you that opportunity to do that, to help strengthen this case before we submit it for final decision. Of course, my decisions are all appealable to the Zoning Board of Appeals, which is another route that, depending on what that decision is, that you could take as well.
May I address your question?
Yeah, please.
Okay, you've already ruled that the continuance has been denied. I'm not seeking a continuance, and I don't want to do that. I think we've given you enough information to make a decision as it is. And I appreciate the opportunity to continue it, but we are on a bit of a deadline here to get financing. And the problem, I'm a construction estimator by profession, and I can tell you right now, and Scott can tell you, and Tony as well, everybody, all the guys in this call can, that time is money in construction right now, and the cost of materials isn't getting any less. We've done 2 cost estimates on this house already, and I don't even want to tell you how much it went up between the first and the second. So I don't want to unnecessarily delay it. If we continue it 2 weeks, I guess I have a question for you. Does that push your decision back 2 weeks as well?
Yeah, the decision will be
Okay.
will be on the same time frame whenever the
Okay.
Whenever the hearing closes. But if you know this goes forward and is denied, then you can't bring the same application back in front of me. You'll have to go through the appellate process, which is much longer than 2 weeks. And you'll have to start, if you do change the design and want to bring a new design in, you'll have to start over, which is that same 6-week time frame or more. So
okay. I appreciate that. You mentioned a minute or two ago about a continuance would give me more time to dialogue with my neighbors. And as much as I respect and appreciate their neighborliness, and I'm glad those guys are here. They are top-notch neighbors. We couldn't have better neighbors, and I appreciate their point of view. I don't think that if I go to all this extra expense and time, that they're going to necessarily agree with a 35-foot tall house as opposed to what we've 39 feet 10 inches. And I don't think it should come down to just what two of my neighbors should decide what my house looks like. We are going through the process. We're respecting the process. I think there's enough evidence, especially if you come out and take a look for yourself, that their view isn't going away. It's going to be changed a little bit, sure, but I don't think it's fair to penalize us by forcing us to build something we don't want to build in order to protect something that they feel like they have, that they're still going to have. I disagree with the assertion that the view will be severely negatively impacted. It will be different. It won't be the same as what they have now.
I understand that, and like I said, it's your decision how you'd like this to go forward, and it's your decision if you were to continue it, whether you want to dialogue with them at all. It's just I think if you're able to demonstrate your claims in a more scientific or concrete way, that it may open up an ability to dialogue with your neighbors and maybe get their support. But like I said, it is your call. I think
I understand that, and I before I answer your question, I do want to see what my guys have to say, but and I'm not putting words into your mouth, but I just want to make sure I'm understanding you correctly, David. Are you saying if my 2 neighbors present on the call today don't have an objection that it would be approved?
Let me be clear about that. I have to look at everything. All of the testimony here today from you, from neighbors, from anyone else, from our zoning plans examiner, the entire application package, all of those things that I've seen, and then make a determination based on the code whether I think this is appropriate. So it's a totality of the circumstances. And if any time that you can get more support for a project, particularly from neighbors who are going to be most impacted by it, it certainly helps. Is that what I'm looking at? Am I giving the neighbors a de facto decision making on this? Absolutely not. I have, trust me, I have ruled against some neighbors quite a few times in this role, and I do it often, and I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying generally that it may be helpful. It is generally helpful. I'm sorry. Did the architect, Mr. Sorry, I'm going to butcher your name, Tony. Did you want to chime in?
Could I ask a clarification question on behalf of Dan? So if let's say, for instance, it appears that the rear yard setback it's not being objected against. It's the height issue is the issue here. So if you were to rule that, I gotta say this right. If your ruling is that the height needs to be respected, the 35-foot height, and everything else is okay with the design, and we make design changes to come in compliance with the 35-foot, does that just go back as a staff level review to make sure that it complies with that height requirement?
That's right. Yep. You would have
not have to go back through a public hearing.
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all. I just wanted to clarify that on Dan's behalf.
Yeah, Tony, thanks for asking that question. And actually it made me think of something I wanted to ask. David, can you make a decision that has conditions on it that, the Frondorf's application is approved, conditioned upon the building height not exceeding 35 feet to the midpoint of the gable?
I could, but a denial of the height request would serve the same purpose. Just a straight denial, because then it would just revert back to you'd be subject to whatever the code says, and that's 35.
Okay, but I guess to Tony's point, do we have to go through this process again?
So it only if you want some sort of additional variance. So
Okay.
if I were to deny the height request and to approve the rear setback, you can build that home exactly to the standards you want, as long as it doesn't violate any of the other regulations or restrictions, and you can have
Including
that
the
rear
rear?
setback as well.
Including the rear?
No, that you'll be good.
Okay, all right. Okay, so if I still have the floor for a second, and I David, I'm asking you because I want to respect your authority as the hearing examiner, but I'm really asking Greg and Jay, if we redesign the house to a 35-foot height to the midpoint of the gable, not the total height, would you guys be okay with that?
So they would only be able to object at that point to the rear setback.
Yeah.
And Greg or Jay, do you have any objection? to the rear
So
setback?
that's, yeah, I was trying to break in and tell Dan earlier, Jay and I don't get a say on the height if you're up to code. You could build a 35-foot house, any color you want, whatever you want to do with it. As long as the midpoint of the gable doesn't exceed 35, we're not involved. So we're only involved because there's a variance away from that standard. So you wouldn't need to ask us anything other than the rear set thing, and I think they're going to approve that anyway.
Well,
So,
I understand
matter.
that. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate the input.
I was trying to help you.
I know, and I'm cognizant of that, and I appreciate that. I guess what I'm really saying is even if I came in with a 30-foot tall house, we're in the hillside district, so we'd be having this public hearing no matter what. So
No, he's saying you would.
Yeah,
That's not
You would not.
Greg, give me a sec here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Dan, I'm trying to say as clear as possible and unequivocally, if you build that house to 35 feet, even if it does impact their views, if you built to 35 feet and it completely took away their views, they would have zero ability to object to that. That if
Okay.
you build it to code,
Okay,
if you build it to code, then
that's-
then it goes through.
I appreciate the answer. Thank you. And that was clear and unequivocal. So I appreciate that. So given that, well, can I mute myself for just 2 seconds to confer with my wife for a second?
Sure. Go ahead.
Is that okay? Thank you. Stand by.
Okay.
Hey, David. Okay. Hey,
Yeah.
we're back live. You know, it's complete. Again, we respect and understand Greg and Jay's point of view, and we want to be good neighbors. But my big thing is I don't want to extend this anything longer than it needs to. If we expressed a willingness now to ask Tony to shorten our wall height, could we, as long as my neighbors don't object to it, I don't want to have to ask for a continuance to try to prove the case of the height. If we stipulated to that, could we save that unnecessary lapse of time by not having to come back to do a public hearing? And I don't want to drag, not only everybody on the call is charging me by the hour, which I'm totally fine with, but I'm taking Jay and Greg away from their jobs. And I want to be respectful of everybody here. So I guess what we're saying is we'd be willing to consider a lower roof as long as it's code compliant, 35 feet or less to the midpoint of the gable. But that doesn't mean I have to ask for continuance, does it?
So no, if you're saying that, you're saying that you would be willing to build it to 35, is that what you're?
What I'm saying is we would stipulate to the need to build it to a code compliant height. So, but I don't want to have to do that and have to come back for a public hearing. I want to be sure about that.
Yeah.
I want to be sure about that. I'm expressing, Becky and I are expressing a willingness to reconsider.
Okay.
So, but
me.
If I tell you I don't want a continuance right now, you could very well deny our height variance, and we wouldn't necessarily be starting all over, but we would redesign the wall heights.
Yeah, I want to give Walt an opportunity to jump in here.
Yeah.
Walt, and correct me if I'm wrong, as long as reducing the height of the home doesn't create any additional conflicts with the zoning code, then you will not need to come back in front of me. But if for some reason reducing the height also created an additional setback or something like that, then you may need to come in front of me. But assuming that you don't need any other, there's no collateral sort of zoning relief that occurs as a result of lowering the height of the home, then you will not need to come back in front of me. Walt, please.
That's a correct statement. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll review what he submits, and as long as it's in same location, we don't move it sideways, frontwards, backwards, anything like that. And all he does is reduce it down to where it meets the 35 foot. Then he would be approved. And even if he still had his bridge going out to his area in the back, which you would possibly, I can't say approve, but we did recommend approval for, as long as that's in the same location, yeah, we wouldn't need to have anything.
Okay. All right. Given all that, David, we are willing, I guess, to risk the chance that you would deny the height variance, but approve the rear variance. And given that I'm seeing some nodding heads from my neighbors and friends that we would be, they'd be okay with a height that was code compliant. I don't want to extend the hearing, so I'm telling you, we do not want a continuance.
Okay.
We would like to let you rule on what we've presented, but I don't want to have to present any additional documentation with respect to the height, because I don't really know how to do that. And I'm sure one of these guys might, but it's just to me, it's just another setback in time. So I guess that's it.
Okay, yeah, I think we're on the same page. You know, if you have
Okay.
additional questions procedurally, you feel free to reach out in the meantime about just procedural type questions. As soon as the
Sure.
decision is rendered, if anyone on the call has any questions about the decision or any portion of that, you can reach out to myself, or Walt Mueller also could probably walk you through some of those questions as well. So feel free to reach out to either of us.
Okay, thank you.
And then, yeah, I think we'll leave it at that then. I want to thank everyone for their time and their testimony here today. Unless there are any other questions at the moment, I think we'll go ahead and adjourn. Let me just say also this, that the decision will be, I have to sort of formalize this decision. It'll be written. As soon as I finish it, I put it into a PDF and I email it to everybody who's in the hearing. So as soon as, so you all will have the decision just moments after it's complete. Okay. Again, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to reach out. I hope you all have a